On a freezing winter night, a millionaire stepped into a dark alley and found a little girl standing alone on the ice. She looked up and whispered, "You're not going to hurt me, are you?" What he discovered next would expose a powerful secret and change both their lives forever. Behind a closed diner in a narrow frozen alley, Alaric Vale steps away from a glittering charity gala to catch his breath. The city is loud in the distance, but the alley is too quiet. Then he sees her, a little girl in thin sneakers, standing on the ice like she has forgotten she is cold. Her coat is too big in the shoulders and too short at the wrists. She studies him not like a child meeting a stranger, but like someone calculating danger. Then she asks in a soft, careful voice, "You're not going to hurt me, are you, mister?" The question stops him colder than the wind. Alaric doesn't rush toward her. He raises his hands, keeps his voice low, and places his scarf and a sealed cup of hot cider on a crate between them. She watches his hands before she watches his face. Only when he steps back does she move. She takes the scarf first, then the drink. When her sleeve slips, Alaric notices a small, bent silver charm hanging from her neck, clutched like a lifeline. Then he hears it. An engine. At the end of the alley, under a failing streetlight, a black SUV sits idling in the snow. And suddenly Alaric knows this is not random. This is not simply a lost child in the cold. Something is waiting for her. And maybe watching him too. Snow drifts sideways between the walls. The diner sign flickers weakly overhead. Alaric studies the girl more carefully now. She is maybe 8, though hardship has made her harder to read. She doesn't tremble the way most children do in winter. She stands too still. Stillness like that isn't courage, it's conditioning. He asks if she is waiting for someone. "My aunt," she says. The answer comes too quickly, too polished, too practiced. He asks how long she's been here. She shrugs and says, "Since it got dark." At the mouth of the alley, the SUV's headlights blink once and go dark again, but the engine continues to hum. The sound settles under Alaric's skin. He reaches slowly for his phone and tells her he is going to call for help. When he says the word safe, her jaw tightens. Her fingers crush the bent silver charm against her palm. "Don't," she whispers. That single word tells him everything her silence has not. She is not afraid of getting in trouble. She is afraid of being found. Alaric realizes kindness itself may scare her. Hope may scare her more than the cold ever could. Because hope asks a child to believe someone will stay, and life has already taught her what happens when adults leave. He steps back one more inch and says quietly, "I'm not leaving." This time he means it before he fully understands why. Somewhere far behind him, the gala continues, bright music, laughter, applause, speeches about generosity. But in this alley with snow on the ground and danger idling at the curb, Alaric Vale feels the truth more clearly than he has in years. This is where the real story is. Alaric dials 911, slowly making sure she can see every movement. He requests a welfare check and specifically asks for an officer trained in child cases. His voice is measured, accountable, careful. He gives his name. He gives the exact location. He gives nothing that could make this look like panic, because panic can turn help into chaos. The girl steps back half a foot and places the crate between them, as if even trust needs cover. When he ends the call, he lowers himself slightly so he won't tower over her. "You hungry?" he asks. She doesn't say yes. She doesn't say no. But her eyes flick briefly toward his coat pocket where money usually lives. Alaric understands instantly. She is not wondering whether he can help. She is wondering what he will want in return. "I'm not asking for anything," he says softly. For the first time, something in her face cracks not into tears, but into uncertainty. Then flashing red and blue lights paint the alley walls. The SUV at the end of the alley starts moving. Not fast, not guilty looking, just gone. That frightens Alaric more than speed would have. Officer Tessa Moreno steps out first, calm and steady, body camera recording, hands visible. She takes in the entire scene with one professional glance: wealthy man, child, winter alley, fear in the air. Then she crouches to the girl's level and says gently, "Hey, I'm Officer Tessa. Nobody's in trouble. We just want to make sure you're warm tonight." The girl says nothing at first. Then after a long silence, she gives them the first real piece of herself. "My name is Ren." EMS arrives quickly. The medic doesn't argue with what he sees. Ren's skin is too cold, her shoes too thin, her responses too flat. Possible hypothermia, possible neglect, possible trauma. They wrap her in a thermal blanket with careful hands and guide her into the ambulance. Alaric is told to stay back. He obeys instantly. That matters. He calls his attorney from the curb, not to protect himself from blame, but to create a clear legal record. He puts the call on speaker near Officer Moreno. He states exactly what happened: welfare check, police response, medical evaluation. He makes it impossible for anyone later to twist his role into something suspicious. The attorney responds clearly: "You are not taking custody. You are facilitating safety." Across the ambulance doorway, Ren hears every word. At the hospital, fluorescent lights flatten everything. The waiting area smells like disinfectant and exhaustion. Ren sits in a molded plastic chair, wrapped in that silver blanket, like a tiny fragile survivor, pretending not to be fragile at all. She doesn't cry. She watches every exit. A toddler across the room starts crying hard. The mother looks overwhelmed. Without being asked, Ren quietly slips off her own blanket and drapes it over the toddler's lap, then steps back, as if kindness itself might be forbidden. That is the moment something changes inside Alaric. This is not a child made cruel by pain. This is a child made careful by it. A social worker approaches the intake desk, types Ren's name into the system, and goes pale. "What is it?" Alaric asks. She hesitates too long. Then she angles the tablet slightly, and Alaric sees a logo he recognizes immediately: Haynes Children's Promise. A white dove in gold trim. He knows that logo because his company donated to it last year. He remembers the gala photos, the handshake, the speeches about saving vulnerable children, the applause. Across the waiting room, Ren is standing alone again, looking toward a locked hallway, as if waiting for adults to decide where to send her next. Alaric stares at the logo on the screen. The charity he helped fund is attached to this child's file. And for the first time that night, he understands this may be bigger than abandonment. Much bigger. Officer Moreno remains nearby while a hospital social worker quietly explains that Ren's case has been reopened multiple times. Temporary placements, emergency transfers, short-term holds, reassignments. Every few weeks, sometimes days apart. A child moved like luggage, a life reduced to forms. Naomi Cross from Child Protective Services arrives with a paper folder tucked under her arm and frustration buried under professionalism. She has seen Ren's name before, more than once. She doesn't say much at first, but her eyes say enough. This case has history, and not the kind anyone wants on record. Then Detective Mara Quinn enters. She is not loud. She does not perform authority. She carries it quietly. The hospital system flagged Ren's name automatically because of repetitive placement irregularities. Mara requests access to the file under proper authorization and begins scrolling through dates, locations, signatures, transfer notes. The more she reads, the more still she becomes. Repeated placements inside the same partner network, she murmurs. "What does that mean?" Alaric asks. Mara turns the screen just enough for him to see. Short-term transfer, evaluation, temporary relocation, reassignment, missing days, gaps in documentation. Notes marked resolved, followed by new intake dates almost immediately after. "This doesn't look random," Mara says. Naomi swallows. Because it isn't. Stamped across every page is the same name: Haynes Children's Promise. and near several approvals one signature appears again and again. Victor Haynes. Alaric feels his stomach tighten. The founder himself, a man celebrated in magazines, praised at fundraisers, photographed beside vulnerable children and giant checks. A man Alaric has shaken hands with more than once. In the corner of the room, Wren grips her bent silver charm hard enough to leave marks in her hand. Mara notices. "How many homes have you been in?" she asks gently. Wren counts silently with her eyes, then stops. "Enough," she says. It is the kind of answer no child should know how to give. And in that moment, Mara closes the file and looks at Alaric with the blunt clarity of someone who has seen systems weaponized before. "This isn't a broken system," she says quietly. "It's a steered one." Not long after midnight, Victor Haynes arrives at the hospital. He comes in a charcoal coat dusted with snow, moving with the calm confidence of a man who has spent decades being welcomed into every room. Two lawyers follow behind him at a respectful distance. Not bodyguards. That would look crude. Legal counsel looks cleaner. Victor spots Alaric and smiles as if they are meeting for lunch rather than over the fate of a child. "Mr. Vale," he says smoothly, extending a hand. "Didn't expect to see you here." Alaric does not take it. Victor adapts without missing a beat. He presents identification to Mara before she asks. Cooperative, transparent, always first to appear reasonable. He explains that the foundation was informed one of their supported minors had been admitted and that they take all child welfare matters seriously. Supported minors. The phrase lands wrong. Not children, not kids. Assets with paperwork. Naomi Cross steps in and states clearly that no transfer of custody or placement will occur tonight without formal review. Victor agrees instantly, too easily. That is what makes him dangerous. He does not push where others can see him push. He bends the room by sounding helpful. Mara asks about repeated short-term transfers connected to Wren's file. Victor answers with polished concern. The foster system is overburdened. We assist where resources fall short. Administrative error, he says, is not conspiracy. Complex cases require flexibility. Temporary placement changes are sometimes necessary. Every sentence is designed to turn suspicion into bureaucracy. Across the hall, Wren watches him without expression. But when Victor finally glances at her, Alaric notices something tiny and terrible. Wren does not look confused. She looks resigned, like she knows this man, not closely, not safely, but enough to understand that when he appears, decisions are about to be made for her. As Victor prepares to leave, he pauses near Alaric and speaks quietly enough that only he can hear. "Systems are delicate," he says. "Interference can create unfortunate consequences." Alaric holds his gaze and replies just as quietly, "So can silence." Victor's smile thins. Then he walks away, like a man who believes the building still belongs to him. The hospital doors slide open behind Alaric as he steps into the freezing parking lot to breathe. Snow still falls in slow, hard sheets beneath the streetlights. His car waits under a lamp near the curb. The driver's door is slightly open. Not wide, just enough. That is what makes it chilling. Nothing is stolen. Nothing is broken. The interior is untouched except for a folded cream-colored card placed neatly on the dashboard. He opens it. 2 words, "Walk away." No signature, no threat spelled out. Just a message restrained enough to feel intimate. Across the lot, a black SUV idles for one long second before pulling into traffic and disappearing. Back inside, Mara finds him in the corridor and reads his face before he shows her the card. "This won't stay quiet," she says. Good, Alaric answers. Because quiet is how people like Victor Haynes survive. Mourning does not bring relief. It brings paperwork. Naomi Cross is in a side office with hospital administration when her expression changes from tired to horrified. She walks into the hallway holding an official-looking folder with both hands. There's been an authorization, she says. Mara takes it from her. Emergency transfer order. Specialized trauma placement. Off-site care facility. Filed before dawn under a medical exception clause. Signed by an on-call judge through an ex parte request. Legal enough to move fast. Difficult enough to challenge later. Foundation medical liaison request. Haynes Children's Promise letterhead. Everything polished, everything stamped, everything designed to look compassionate. It buys them 48 hours, Naomi says tightly. And 48 hours is enough time to bury a child in the system again, Mara replies. 2 transport staff in pressed coats arrive outside Wren's room carrying clipboards and a folded winter coat. They do not look cruel. That is the point. They look efficient. Alaric steps into the doorway and sees Wren sitting on the edge of the hospital bed, feet barely touching the floor, silver charm resting against her collarbone. They found a better place for you, one of the staff says gently. Wren doesn't react. She simply looks at Alaric and says in a small, flat voice, "They can take me whenever they want. It is not fear speaking, it is experience." Every instinct in Alaric screams to block the door, to refuse, to stop them physically. But Naomi tells him the truth. If he interferes, Victor wins. They will paint him as unstable, impulsive, dangerous. They will use his anger against her. So Alaric does the only thing left. He walks beside Wren all the way to the car, not blocking, not surrendering, witnessing. And before she gets inside, he bends slightly and says, "I'm not walking away." For the first time, her grip on the silver charm loosens. Only a little, but enough. The Foundation SUV glides out of the hospital lot with the soft politeness of institutional power. No sirens, no struggle, no headlines that say kidnapping, only lawful-looking movement. That is the horror of it. Alaric remains under the awning with snow blowing across his shoes and watches the taillights disappear. His phone starts vibrating almost immediately. "Board chair," he answers. The man on the other end does not bother with concern. He goes straight to optics. A blurry clip from the gala is already circulating online. Alaric Vale leaving a charity event and later appearing outside a hospital in the middle of an unfolding child welfare controversy. Reporters are sniffing around. Shareholders are asking questions. The Haynes Foundation has already issued a vague statement about outside interference complicating recovery. They do not name Alaric. They do not need to. The board chair tells him to step away, say nothing, distance the company, avoid reputational fallout. Alaric closes his eyes and hears Wren's voice in the alley again. "You're not going to hurt me, are you, mister?" Then later, "They can take me whenever they want." He realizes something clean and final. Silence would hurt her more than scandal could hurt him. "You can't threaten my career if I throw it away first," he says. The board chair goes silent. Then comes the anger. "You're overreacting. Think strategically. This is bigger than one child." Alaric looks through the hospital glass at Mara, and Naomi bent over legal documents trying to fight a machine that has had years to perfect its cover. "No," he says softly. "This is exactly as big as one child." He resigns effective immediately. When he walks back inside, Mara studies him once and understands. Naomi looks startled. "That was your line," Mara says. "I know," Alaric replies. Then Mara's phone rings from an unknown number. She answers. A woman's trembling voice introduces herself as Elena Price, an employee of Haynes Children's Promise. She says she kept copies, transport logs, internal schedules, invoices, modified records. She says she could not sleep anymore. She says the place Wren is being taken to is not listed properly as a residential care site. It is a therapeutic property under a subsidiary organization. An address follows. A property outside the city. Serene website. Clean records. Quiet road. Perfect for disappearing children in legal language. When the call ends, Mara looks at the others and says only one word, proof. And suddenly this stops being about suspicion. Now it is about exposure. At special victims, the night becomes evidence. A conference room fills with copied transport logs, billing sheets, placement requests, timestamp discrepancies, coded abbreviations, driver initials, and facility schedules. Elena Price sits in a chair near the wall with both hands locked together in her lap, as if bracing for impact. She is pale, frightened, and done protecting the lie. Mara spreads the documents across the table like a battlefield map. Naomi cross-references child welfare records against transport entries. Alaric stands at the window, coat still damp with snow, reading the same names over and over until they feel less like paperwork and more like routes. Mara draws a line across 2 sets of timestamps. These intake records don't match discharge logs. Naomi leans in, meaning the children were in motion before the system said they were. Elena swallows and nods. They called them clinical evaluation runs. But return times were often rewritten, rounded, delayed, sometimes erased and re-entered later. Why, Alaric asks, because movement was the point, Elena answers. Not care. There it is, not a broken charity, a business model. Mara requests emergency judicial review. A judge agrees to a limited welfare warrant and documentation seizure based on credible evidence of misrepresented medical relocation. Not enough yet to blow the whole structure apart. Enough to get through the door. And while officers prepare, Wren sits miles away in a room painted in calm, neutral colors. She is given dinner on a tray she does not touch. A camera watches her from the corner disguised as a smoke detector. The door closes with a soft mechanical click. Locked. No one yells at her. No one needs to. This kind of system does not rely on noise. It relies on inevitability, on children learning that resistance changes nothing. Back in the city, Alaric stares at the address. A retreat property, therapeutic language, good zoning, polished website, warm lights in brochure photos. It disgusts him how neatly evil can dress itself when enough money is involved. Mara collects her coat and the warrant. This is entry, not victory, she says. Naomi nods. Elena looks like she might be sick. Alaric picks up his gloves. Somewhere out there, Wren is waiting in another room chosen by strangers. This time he will not arrive late. The property sits beyond the city line behind ornamental pines and a long curved drive. It looks less like a facility than a country inn, warm windows, tasteful stonework, a wreath on the front door, expensive calm arranged like scenery. Snow muffles every sound. That is what makes it so sickening. Care should not need to disguise itself. Mara approaches first with the warrant in hand. Naomi stands at her shoulder. 2 uniformed officers move into position while an unmarked vehicle waits near the drive. Alaric remains where instructed, present, visible, not interfering. A man in a pressed sweater answers the door with a smile that dies half a second too late. "Can I help, Detective Quinn?" Mara says. "Judicial welfare warrant and record seizure." "Step aside." He hesitates. That hesitation is all she needs. The officers move in, no shouting, no dramatic breach, just procedure which somehow feels more powerful than force ever could. Cameras switch on, doors are opened, computer stations secured, filing cabinets photographed before being touched. Down the hallway, the place smells like lavender and disinfectant. At the far end, one door stands slightly open. Alaric sees it before anyone else. Mara glances at him once, giving permission only with her eyes. He walks toward it slowly and knocks. Silence. Then a small movement. The door opens. Wren stands there in borrowed clothes, pale hair tucked behind one ear, silver charm in her hand. She does not run to him. She does not cry. She only studies his face for one brutal second to see whether he truly meant what he said. "I told you," Alaric says quietly. "I wasn't walking away." For the first time since the alley, she takes a step toward him without being asked. Behind them, officers retrieve file boxes, laptops, billing ledgers, transfer schedules. Naomi documents room conditions. Mara checks the intake systems and finds children listed under codes, not names with internal movement notes tied to foundation disbursements. Money follows transfers. Transfers produce money. Children become line items. Outside the gates, a local news van begins to arrive, tipped off by somebody who either wants exposure or chaos. Victor Haynes is nowhere in sight. Of course he isn't. Men like him build systems precisely so they do not have to stand beside the suffering they create. Naomi rests a hand lightly on Ren's shoulder and says, "We're taking you back somewhere safe for now." Ren's eyes never leave Alaric's face. She doesn't ask if he's staying this time. Maybe because a part of her already knows the answer. Ren rides back to the city in an unmarked vehicle sitting in the rear seat beside Alaric, while snow and streetlights pass over the window in alternating bands of silver and gold. She stares outside for most of the ride, not frightened exactly, but braced. Children like Ren do not confuse rescue with safety. They have seen too many adults arrive with promises. Naomi sits in the front passenger seat making calls to temporary placement coordinators and emergency judges. Mara follows in another car with the seized evidence. The operation went cleanly, but cleanly does not mean simply. The Foundation's legal team is already filing objections demanding clarification, accusing law enforcement of procedural overreach. The machine is fighting back. In the quiet car, Ren finally speaks. Court Alaric turns toward her. "Yes." She nods once and keeps looking at the glass. That's where they decide if I'm real. The sentence cuts him deeper than anything Victor Haynes said all night. No child should understand validation as a legal event. Alaric answers slowly, carefully. "You are real whether they say it or not." She does not respond. But this time when she looks at him, she is not measuring for danger. She is measuring for truth. At the station, evidence is cataloged immediately, duplicated, secured, and distributed across agencies. Mara refuses to let this case depend on a single room, a single file server, or a single signature. Redundancy is protection. She knows powerful people do not merely lie, they erase. Elena Price gives a full statement. Her voice shakes only once. Naomi secures temporary protective authority to keep Ren in hospital-supervised care until the emergency hearing. And outside, the media frenzy grows. Headlines begin as scandal and drift toward investigation. Alaric's resignation explodes online. Commentators debate judgment, public image, risk, charity optics, donor responsibility, corporate fallout. None of it matters to him now. Because in a hospital room under two bright lights, a child is sleeping with one hand wrapped around a bent silver charm, like it is the last thing no one has successfully taken from her. And tomorrow, a courtroom will decide whether the people who moved her like inventory finally have to answer for it. Tonight, Blackthorn is buried in snow. By morning, it may start to thaw. Courtrooms are never as dramatic as movies promise. No thunder, no swelling music. Only polished wood, old paper, controlled voices, and silence heavy enough to pin breathing to the floor. Ren waits outside courtroom 4B in a high-backed chair that makes her look even smaller. Her feet do not touch the ground. Morning light falls in pale stripes across the hallway windows, turning dust into something almost sacred. Naomi reviews documents near the wall. Mara stands beside a pillar with a tablet in one hand and stillness in the other. Alaric sits next to Ren without touching her, without crowding her, simply there. Across the hall, Victor Haynes adjusts his cufflinks. He is immaculate. Tailored navy suit, silver tie, composed expression. To strangers, he looks inconvenienced, maybe even wounded by false accusation. Public men rehearse innocence long before they need it. Ren sees him and goes very still. Not shaking, not crying, still the way prey goes, still when it spots a trap it has seen before. Alaric notices her hand move toward the bent silver charm, and then stop halfway. That tiny interruption matters. She does not need to grip it as hard anymore. When the courtroom doors open and the clerk calls everyone in, the adults rise at the judge's entrance. So does the system. The state presents documents first: transfer logs, timestamp inconsistencies, foundation-linked medical relocation requests, financial overlays, placement chains routed through affiliated properties. Each piece by itself could be dismissed as confusion. Together they form intention. Victor's attorneys argue complexity, overburdened networks, clerical issues, emergency childcare realities. Mara sits like stone. Naomi keeps her file open and ready. Alaric watches Victor, who never once looks directly at Ren for more than a heartbeat. That tells him almost everything. Men who have truly cared for children usually meet their eyes. Men who have used them prefer paperwork. Then Elena Price is called. Her testimony is quiet, restrained, devastating. They called it care, she says. But the paperwork moved like shipping. A murmur stirs through the courtroom. Victor's attorneys object to tone. The judge allows the answer to stand, because tone is not the problem. Truth is. And soon that truth will have the smallest witness in the room. When Ren's name is called, the room changes. It is not louder. It is smaller. The lawyers remain seated. The spectators lean forward. Even the heating vents seem to hush. Small footsteps cross polished wood with more weight than grown men's arguments ever could. Ren climbs into the witness chair with help from the clerk and sits straight-backed, both hands, visible chin lifted just enough to keep herself together. Alaric does not move. He does not rush to comfort her. He knows now that belief must leave a child room to stand. The oath is explained in gentle language she can understand. Ren nods. The prosecutor approaches more softly than before. She kneels slightly, lowering herself out of respect, not pity. Ren, she says, can you tell us what happened when you were moved from place to place? Ren looks at the jury first, not at the lawyers, not at the judge, at the people who will decide whether adults finally hear her. They said it was for care, she answers. Her voice is small, but it does not tremble. But nobody asked me. The courtroom is motionless. They put me in cars, she continues, sometimes with logos, sometimes without. They said it was temporary. She pauses. It always was. That line lands like a bruise. The defense attorney rises for cross-examination with a sympathetic smile built for television. He speaks gently the way adults do when they hope politeness will soften what they are about to erase. Ren, he says, is it possible you misunderstood why those moves happened? Ren tilts her head, the exact same way she tilted it in the alley. Assessing, weighing, choosing precision over fear. They always said it was to help, she replies. And was it? He asks. She thinks for only a second. No. No speech. No tears. No performance. Just the kind of answer children give when they've been forced to become honest beyond their years. The attorney changes direction. Do you know Mr. Haynes personally? Yes. How he smiled in pictures. A ripple moves through the room. The attorney presses carefully, and in private Ren's fingers brush the bent silver charm resting at her throat. He didn't smile when the doors closed. Silence follows. Not courtroom silence. Cathedral silence. The kind that makes everyone suddenly aware of who they have believed too easily. Victor Haynes looks at the table in front of him for the first time. The defense sits down shortly after. When Ren is excused, she steps carefully from the witness chair and turns. Her eyes find Alaric immediately. But this time she does not study him to see whether he might disappear. This time she simply looks, and trusts that he will still be there when she reaches him. He is. Of all the testimony that day, the logs, the invoices, the signatures, the transport schedules, the coded facility records, it is Ren's quiet certainty that changes the temperature of the room. Because paper can be argued. An 8-year-old child saying nobody asked me cannot. After Ren's testimony, the courtroom atmosphere shifts from suspicion to fracture. Mara Quinn takes the stand next, and does what great detectives do best. She does not dramatize. She maps. She lays timelines over transport records, billing codes over placement dates, foundation grants over child movements. She shows how emergency medical clauses were used to speed relocation, how gaps in documentation always favored the same affiliated network, how internal transfer windows aligned with funding disbursement. Her voice never rises. It doesn't have to. The pattern speaks for her. Naomi Cross testifies after that, describing repeated case reopenings, stalled reviews, children cycled through specialized evaluation placements that somehow never stabilized them. She does not accuse broadly. She speaks narrowly, which makes it stronger. She says the records behaved less like child welfare files and more like routed inventory. Victor Haynes's legal team fights every inch. Overworked agencies, administrative disorder, miscommunication, institutional burden. The usual language powerful systems use when they hope the public will get lost in complexity. Then Mara introduces the property seizure evidence, photographs of rooms, coding systems, transfer instructions, children listed under internal designators, billing ledgers linked to movement categories, and on one recovered laptop, a spreadsheet with columns that do not belong anywhere near vulnerable kids: duration, route, evaluation, status, placement, yield. The word detonates without needing volume. Victor's mask does not shatter dramatically. It slips in fragments. A tightening in the jaw, a longer blink, a hand that pauses too late above a legal pad. He has spent years surrounding himself with admiration, gala lights, donors, magazine profiles, polished language, and the social immunity of philanthropy. He believed process would protect him. He believed children too frightened to speak and adults too comfortable to question would keep the machine running forever. But the machine has a witness now. More than one. And every witness came with receipts. During a brief recess, Victor approaches Alaric in the hallway, despite his attorney's visible discomfort. "You are making a spectacle out of a delicate system," Victor says quietly. "No," Alaric replies. "You did that. I'm just turning on the lights." Victor studies him with the coldness he normally keeps buried. "You have no idea how many people depend on what I built." Alaric's expression hardens. That's exactly the problem. When court resumes, closing arguments begin to form like storm clouds. This is no longer about a misunderstanding in a winter alley. It is about an empire built on the assumption that vulnerable children do not count enough for anyone powerful to stay. Victor Haynes made one fatal miscalculation. He let one child survive long enough to be believed. Closing arguments are restrained, which somehow makes them hit harder. The prosecution avoids melodrama and focuses on structure. They argue that this case is not about one clerical mistake or one mishandled transfer. It is about engineered movement, about a respected foundation using compassion as camouflage, about children shifted through a network designed to generate control, leverage, and money while hiding beneath the language of care. The defense repeats its final refuge: complexity. Overburdened agencies make errors. Large networks create confusion. Paperwork can mislead. Intent is difficult to prove. But by then, the room has already changed. Complexity has lost its protective glamour. Too many details point in one direction. Too many signatures. Too many aligned dates. Too many children moved in ways no honest charity could explain. The jury leaves. Time slows into the most unbearable shape it can take. Ren sits beside Naomi in the hallway, shoulders small, but no longer folded inward the way they were in the hospital. Mara reviews nothing. She knows the evidence now lives where it needs to live. Alaric stands by the courthouse window and watches the late winter sky begin to soften around the edges. When the jury returns, everyone rises. The foreperson's voice is calm. Guilty on all major counts. The words do not echo. They settle. Victor Haynes does not collapse. Men like him rarely do. He simply sits there as if still convinced the world must eventually correct itself in his favor. But the architecture around him is gone now. Sentencing will come. Partner investigations will widen. Audits will follow. The Foundation's halo has cracked so completely that daylight is pouring through it. Ren looks toward the judge, then toward Alaric, as if waiting for the room to tell her whether this is real. It is. Outside the courthouse, cameras flash, and reporters shout questions into the cold daylight. Alaric says nothing. Mara says nothing. Naomi shields Ren from the crowd as much as the law allows. A car door opens. They begin to leave. Then Ren speaks almost too quietly to hear. So that means they can't take me today. Naomi's face softens first. No, she says. Not today. Ren nods. Not smiling, not celebrating. Just absorbing the possibility of an ordinary safety most children never have to define. On the courthouse steps, spring sunlight touches melted snow. Blackthorn looks washed raw. Not healed, not yet, but exposed. As the car pulls away, Victor Haynes disappears behind courthouse glass and legal consequence. For years, his power lived in rooms where signatures mattered more than children's voices. Today, an 8-year-old girl with a bent silver charm around her neck outlasted all of it. And for the first time in a very long time, the future ahead of her is not a hallway full of locked doors. It is unwritten. Justice does not turn pain into peace overnight. The verdict is not the end of Ren's fear. It is only the end of one source of it. The weeks that follow move in paperwork, evaluations, therapy appointments, supervised reviews, home studies, quiet conversations, and legal caution. No one rushes anything. That matters. Ren has spent too much of her life being moved quickly by adults who claimed urgency. Real care moves differently. It explains itself. Alaric does not try to become her savior in one dramatic leap. He shows up instead. Repeatedly. Patiently. Almost boringly. He attends every approved visit. He arrives on time. He leaves when asked. He does not make promises he cannot immediately keep. He learns that children like Ren do not trust declarations. They trust repetition. At first, their meetings are small. Coloring books in supervised family rooms. Hot chocolate in hospital cafeterias. Silent car rides with Naomi present. Short walks in a courtyard, where the wind still smells like winter and thawed concrete. Ren rarely speaks much, but she notices everything. She notices that Alaric always tells her where he is going before he stands up, that he never disappears in the middle of a sentence, that when he says he will be back on Tuesday, Tuesday comes, and so does he. One afternoon she asks him, "Do rich people always leave?" The question is so blunt, it nearly steals his breath. "Some do," he answers. "And you?" He thinks carefully before replying. "I used to leave the things that mattered because it felt easier. I'm trying not to do that anymore." She accepts the answer with a seriousness far beyond her age. Therapy reveals more slowly what the system cost her: sleep that shatters at footsteps, flinches at locked doors, an instinct to scan every room for exits, and a quiet belief that if adults are being kind, they must want something. Alaric does not argue her out of that belief. He outlasts it. Outside, the public scandal grows wider. Investigations spread into partner agencies, shell entities, affiliated properties, donor channels, and suppressed reports. Victor Haynes becomes a name associated not with philanthropy, but with corruption hidden behind applause. Alaric stays out of interviews. The cameras wanted a dramatic hero. Ren needs something else. A man who keeps showing up without making her healing into a performance. And so day by day, against all spectacle, something fragile begins to form. Not a rescue, a relationship. When the court finally approves extended transitional placement, Ren visits Alaric's home for the first time. It is a modern house above the lake on the north side of the city. Glass stone clean lines, expensive silence. The kind of place designed for success, not childhood. Beautiful, yes, but emotionally empty in the way luxury often is when no one has laughed in it for years. Ren notices immediately. She walks inside slowly, one hand pressed against the silver charm at her throat. Her eyes move over everything, the polished floor, the untouched bookshelves, the immaculate kitchen, the absence of clutter, the absence of life. "Do you live here by yourself?" she asks. "Yes." "Why is it so quiet?" The question lands harder than criticism ever could, because it's true. For years, Alaric built a world optimized for control. Efficient staff, minimal noise, order, distance. A house where nothing unexpected happened, because nothing deeply human had been invited to stay. That afternoon changes the atmosphere of the place more than any architect ever could. Naomi has approved a short visit with conditions, and Ren is allowed to choose where she wants to sit. She chooses the kitchen floor first, then a window seat, then the back porch steps overlooking the gray water. She does not behave like a child being dazzled by wealth. She behaves like a child checking whether the walls themselves are trustworthy. In the kitchen, Alaric asks if she wants cereal grilled cheese fruit soup. He lists options because choice matters. "What do you eat?" she asks. He almost laughs. "Usually coffee and whatever my assistant remembers to order." "That's not dinner." "No," he admits. That earns him the smallest, quickest, almost smile he has ever seen from her. Later, she finds an empty coat hook near the back door and stares at it. What goes there? Nothing yet. She says nothing after that, but the question stays with him. By the end of the visit, the house is no longer untouched. A coloring page lies on the counter. A spoon sits in the sink. One small pair of shoes has left melted snow marks by the mudroom mat. Tiny evidence. Monumental impact. When Naomi arrives to take Ren back for the night, Ren pauses at the door and looks over her shoulder. Not afraid. Thinking. The house behind Alaric is still too quiet. But for the first time in years, it sounds less like emptiness and more like room. Room for someone to belong. Healing does not move in a straight line. It circles. It retreats. It tests. There are good visits followed by hard nights. Afternoons where Ren laughs once a tiny startled sound, as if she forgot joy was allowed, followed by evenings where she shuts down completely, because too much safety feels dangerous after years without it. Hope has side effects for children like her. During one overnight transition weekend, she wakes at 2:13 a.m. because a heating vent clicks in the hallway. Alaric hears movement from his room and finds her standing near the kitchen in socks, rigid with that old survival stillness. Not crying. Listening. "What happened?" he asks softly. "I thought someone was coming." He does not tell her she is safe as if safety were a switch. He knows better now. Instead, he says, "It was the heat." She nods but does not relax, so he does something small and real. He walks her through the house. Front door locked. Back door locked. Alarm on. No one inside but them. He shows her each room because mystery feeds fear. He lets her check the hall closet herself. He lets her decide when they are done. In the kitchen, he warms milk he never used to keep in the house before she existed in it. They sit at the table under a low light that makes the expensive room finally feel human. After a long silence, she asks, "Do I have to be good all the time to stay here?" The question nearly breaks him. No. She looks unconvinced. He tries again, gentler. "You don't earn being cared for by being easy." Her eyes drop to the mug in her hands. "People leave when I'm hard." Alaric tells her the hardest truth he has. The people who left were wrong. That night, she falls asleep again on the living room couch under a blanket with the television on low. Alaric stays in the chair nearby, laptop closed, phone face down, because some forms of protection are not dramatic. They are simply present. In the dark, quiet house, the distance between them narrows by almost nothing. which is how real closeness often works. Not in speeches, in hours, in wakefulness, in staying. Months passed the way real healing always does not, in dramatic leaps, but in signatures, interviews, therapy notes, home studies, and quiet acts of trust, repeated until they became something solid. By the time the final adoption hearing arrived, spring had replaced the cruel winter that first brought Wren into Alaric Vale's life. The air outside the courthouse smelled of rain-warmed stone, and for the first time in months, she walked through those doors without fear clawing at her ribs. This courtroom was smaller than the one that had destroyed Victor Haynes. There were no cameras now, no reporters, no flashing headlines, only polished wood, soft voices, and a judge who looked at Wren like she was a child instead of a case file. Naomi Cross stood nearby with a folder tucked to her chest, watching with the kind of careful hope only hard years can teach. Alaric sat beside Wren, still composed but carrying a tension so deep it seemed woven into his breath. The judge smiled gently. "Do you understand what today means?" Wren looked down at her hands for a moment, then lifted her eyes. "It means I don't have to leave again." The room went perfectly still. The judge's expression softened, and even Naomi had to blink back emotion. Papers were passed forward. Signatures followed, one after another, official, final, irreversible. Alaric signed with a hand that nearly betrayed him. Naomi signed with visible relief. Then the judge lowered her pen, lifted her gaze, and made it real. Just like that, the child who had once been moved from place to place like forgotten luggage finally belonged somewhere no one could take from her. When the gavel fell, it was not loud, but to Wren, it sounded like a door locking for the very first time in the right direction. That evening, warm spring light spilled through the kitchen windows of Alaric Vale's home, softening every hard edge the house had once carried. It no longer felt like a place designed only for silence and success. A small coat now hung by the back door. A child's drawing rested crooked on the refrigerator. A cereal bowl sat in the sink. Tiny signs of life had begun to claim the space, and somehow they mattered more than all the polished stone and glass ever had. On the counter lay a small velvet box. Wren noticed it the moment she walked in. "What's that?" she asked quietly. Alaric opened the box and revealed the silver charm she had once clutched in fear so tightly it left marks in her palm. It was still bent, still imperfect, but no longer sharp. A jeweler had reinforced it and reshaped it into a simple bracelet clasp, preserving its scars while taking away the part that could still hurt her. "So it won't cut you anymore," Alaric said. Wren stared at it in silence. That little piece of silver had traveled with her through every hallway, every transfer, every cold room, every moment she thought no one would come back. It had been the one thing the world had not managed to strip away. Now it had changed too. Not erased. Repaired. Alaric fastened it gently around her wrist. The metal caught the evening light, and for a moment Wren said nothing at all. She only looked down at it, as if trying to understand how something broken could still be kept, still be wanted, still be made safe without losing the truth of what it had been. Then she looked up at him, and in the quiet kitchen, with dinner beginning on the stove and sunlight fading gold across the floor, the house stopped feeling like a mansion. It started feeling like home. Morning arrived gently. Sunlight stretched across the kitchen floor in soft golden lines, replacing the gray winter light that had filled Wren's memories for so long. Outside, the lake shimmered quietly under a pale blue sky. Nothing urgent waited. No strangers, no clipboards, no decisions made about her without her. Just morning. Wren padded down the hallway in socks, the silver bracelet resting loosely on her wrist. The charm glinted when it caught the light, no longer sharp, no longer something she had to grip like armor. In the kitchen, Alaric stood at the stove attempting pancakes with the concentration of a man solving a complicated engineering problem. The first one was burned. The second one was slightly better. The third looked strange enough that Wren stared at it and suddenly laughed before she could stop herself. The sound surprised both of them. Alaric turned, smiling. That one was supposed to be a circle. It looks like a map, she said. Of what I don't know, she shrugged. Someplace weird. They ate at the counter while sunlight warmed the room. Every few seconds, Wren glanced toward the door without meaning to. Each time, Alaric was still there, not leaving, not rushing, not disappearing like people used to. After breakfast, she slid off the stool and stood quietly beside him. For a moment, she seemed to be gathering courage for something harder than court. Then she looked up. Daddy. The word settled into the kitchen like something fragile and powerful at the same time. Alaric closed his eyes briefly before answering. Yeah, he said softly. I'm here. Outside, the city moved on with its ordinary day, but inside that quiet house, something extraordinary had finally happened. A promise had stayed. Did this story touch your heart? Let us know how you felt. Rate it from 1 to 10 in the comments below. If it moved you, please like, share, and subscribe to support the channel. Don't forget to tap the bell so you never miss our next heartfelt story. Click the end screen to watch more emotional journeys. See you in the next one.